John Gotti, cunning and flamboyant, charming and deadly. He ordered the killing of anyone who dared to question his absolute authority. He walked with a swagger and he could back it up. He started with nothing and murdered his way to the top. Gotti was the last great mafia don. He learned a valuable lesson, though, just a little too late. The lesson: be careful who you trust, because when you're the big cheese, you got to watch out for rats. Welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal, another episode. And tonight, one of my favorites. I have a thing for mobsters, and growing up, I had a thing for John Gotti. I think I learned a little something about myself when I was doing this research. I think I know where my love of old heavyset men comes from. I saw Gotti strutting out of that courtroom with that big grin on his face, like, "Hey, yeah, how you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing just fine, John, just fine."
Shelly sitting at home swooning over the Teflon Don.
I was. And I have always been fascinated with John Gotti. So you guys know anything about Gotti? Fans of Gotti? Probably not to my level, but
very little.
I
know enough that I could get into trouble.
Oh yeah, I love mafia stuff, so I can't wait to get into this one.
Yes. So, gentlemen, everybody doing good tonight? Anything we want to talk about or say before we jump into John Gotti?
Nope. I think that we announced everything we wanted to announce on our little special announcement at 7 p.m. If y'all didn't catch that, make sure to go back and rewatch that.
Go back and watch it.
Dropped 4 announcements tonight, so just
Well, then let's get going, guys.
Absolutely.
Now, before I start telling you about John Gotti, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the mob. And whenever I tell you this, I need to tell you this because every family in the mob is involved at some point in John Gotti's story, whether he was in league with them or whether he was screwing them over or whether he was having them whacked. So in 1931, following decades of turf wars, a Brooklyn bootlegger named Salvatore Maranzano, I almost got that name wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be one of those nights where I have to apologize for my pronunciation. He established the leaders of the New York City's 5 largest Italian-American criminal organizations and declared himself what's known as the Capo dei Tutti Capi, which is basically the boss of all bosses.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he's like, "Da-da, it's me and I'm in charge," because this was my idea. But Maranzano was soon whacked because the other bosses thought it was kind of better to share the leadership responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So they went ahead and eliminated that problem.
Mm-hmm. Damn, that was quick.
It was quick. It was very quick.
I believe he was stabbed to death in his office, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct.
So,
You are correct.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And so one of these, that we've talked about this mobster before, Lucky Luciano,
he's one of my
formed
favorites.
a group known as the Commission. So, after Maranzano gets whacked, he was the one who's supposed to be the big box. Lucky Luciano says, "Okay, let me show you how this is done." And so he forms what's called the Commission. And it encompassed the 5 families and the bosses of the Chicago affiliates and the Buffalo crime families and the New York crime families. And the commission was kind of a ruling establishment that decided they were going to oversee all mafia activities in the United States, and all conflicts were to be settled there. Any conflicts between the family, you had to bring it to the commission and they would decide how to handle it. So real quick, the 5 families in operation in New York were Colombo, Bonanno, Lucchese, Genovese, and Gambino. Okay, there you go. So
this would be so much easier if we had our slides.
I know, but I'm going to try to break it down for you. Okay, so the Colombo family was founded by Joe Profaci, and it was named after Joseph Colombo. So the guy who founded it isn't necessarily the guy it was named after. The person who's tended to make it the most profitable was who it ended up being named after. And when it was ruled very quietly by Profaci until the 1950s, when capital regime, Fat Joe Gallo, I believe it was Fat Joe Gallo, right?
I think so.
He revolted, and then Gallo was arrested, and Profaci died of cancer, and then the family was reunited under Joseph Colombo. So there was your quick little, here's what happened. And the Colombo family got reunited in 1971. And the second family war starts when Joe Gallo gets out of jail. So he comes for Joe Colombo. And Joe Colombo was shot and ends up dying of cardiac arrest. And then Carmen Persicco, Persico, he decides he's going to rebel against Gallo, and he wins. So under Persico, I knew I'd get it right, Persico. This again, I apologize in advance for my pronunciation. If you didn't know, I'm not Italian, so I'm going to do my best. There was 15 years of peace in the Colombo family under Persico. And in 1991, a war erupted when the acting boss, Victor Arena, made a power play against Carmen Persico, who happened to be in jail. Persico won, but the family never returned to its previous wealth. Now, the second one is the Bonanno crime family, and it was founded by Salvatore Maranzano. Remember, he was the one who was the boss of all bosses, right? But it's named after Joseph Joe Bananas Bonanno. I love all these nicknames. It's so fun.
Oh, Joey Bananas over there.
Yeah, Joey Bananas over there. That's right. I got Blake Sugar Buns and I got Ryan Snickernuts. So, yeah, we have our own mob names. And in the 1960s, yes, you do. You don't get to give yourself your own nickname. Somebody else has to give you a nickname. So in the 1960s, Bonanno tried to overthrow several members of the commission, and he failed. And he disappeared from 1964 to 1966 because he was kind of like laying low because he pissed some people off. And this triggered an intra-family war, which was known as the Banana War because, stupid old Joseph Joe Bananas, his whole damn fault. So it was called the Banana War. And from 76 to 81, the family was infiltrated by the FBI agent calling himself Donnie Brasco. It's a real life thing. He infiltrated the Bonanno family. And because of the infiltration, the Bonanno family was the first family to be kicked out of the convention. They're like, oh no, you don't know what's in your house. You're gone, you're out. And in 1990, under Joseph Massino, the Bonannos got back on the commission, and for a while was one of the most powerful families in New York. But in 2000, after a rash of convictions, Massino became a government informant, and he ended up being the first boss of a New York crime family to turn rat. So there's your Bonanno crime family. Lucchese's. The Lucchese's was founded by Tommy Gagliano. But it was, of course, named after Tommy Lucchese. Again, it's like, why wouldn't it be I guess the Gagliano family doesn't sound like good. Lucchese sounds much more intimidating. And it was originally one of the most powerful in all the crime families. And it changed when Victor Amiso became the boss and named Anthony Casso as his underboss. In 1986, they infiltrated one of the bloodiest, they instigated, one of the bloodiest reigns in mafia history. And Amiso ordered that anyone who crossed him, they're sleeping with the fishes. So it's estimated that the underboss, Anthony Casso, himself murdered between 30 and 40 people and ordered more than 100 murders.
Shit.
And he's the underboss. He wasn't even the dude in charge.
No.
He's the underboss.
Damn.
Yeah. So this is, I'm trying to give you an idea of what kind of setting this was. And in NYPD detectives, oh, wait. Okay. So Casso also had police on his payroll, New York police. Two specifically.
Yeah, don't say.
Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa carried out at least 8 murders. And they were New York City cops on behalf of Casso. And in 1991, acting boss Alphonse Diarco, or Darko, I've heard it both ways. He became the first boss to testify against the mob. So that was not a good thing. So you see, they start falling, but they don't start falling until later, like after the 1990s, where the bosses and stuff are testifying. And we come to the Genovese family. It was founded by Charles Lucky Luciano. So the Genoveses were Lucky Luciano's thing. And it became known as the Luciano crime family from the 1931 to 1957. And it was then named after Vito Genovese. So this is the oldest and the longest running of the 5 New York crime families. And they ran the waterfronts and the docks on the west side of Manhattan. And they controlled who could sell in the Fulton Fish Market. So they were the dock guys. Nobody came in or out of that dock without giving a little something to the Genovese family. And then they got a leader that became known as the Oddfather. This was Vinny the Chin Gigante. So he got the name the Oddfather because he would wander around the streets of Greenwich Village in a bathrobe, talking to himself. And he was feigning insanity in order to avoid prosecution. And he forbade anyone from saying his name. And if they wanted to talk about the boss or Vinny the Chin, they would just go, hey, you got to go and do it. This is Chin Says. This is how they referred to him. He forbade them from saying his name because he didn't want to be linked to anything. He didn't want to be on a wiretap. So if you were going to talk about him, you better, this was the sign. They touched their chin. So being kind of forward thinking, he took advantage of the housing market. Whenever the housing market had all of that free lending and stuff like that, and they created a massive mortgage fraud. And they were also the first crime family to utilize the internet to expand their illegal gambling market. The family benefited the most. This is also the family that benefited the most from the omerta. Omerta is a code of silence. And that you should always conduct the organization in secrecy. And they also believed in absolutely zero cooperation with the law. And to date, only 11 members or associates have ever turned state's evidence against the family. And that didn't start until 1990. So this was the one that they had a real good hold on their members.
It had a tight lid on everybody.
That's right. That's right. Because, if you couldn't even say, how are you going to convict him? How are you going to catch him? If there's nothing that you say that can convict him. And then we get to the family we're going to talk about tonight, the Gambinos. This was founded by Vincent Mangano, and it was named after Carlos Gambino. In 1930, underboss Albert Anastasia was the operating head of the infamous group Murder Incorporated. We've all heard of Murder Incorporated, right? This was a underworld enforcement group. And Anastasia took out Mangano. So the underboss took out the boss. And Anastasia named Gambino as his underboss. And then Gambino took out Anastasia. So this group was known as the bloodiest, most violent, most feared of all the families. And they became the most powerful and the richest. Family fortunes grew when Gambino partnered with Meyer Lansky to control the gambling interest in Cuba. A very smart move. But trouble erupts when Gambino names Paul Castellano as his successor. In 1985, Gotti takes out Castellano. Gotti took out the boss. And then Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano cooperates with the FBI, and his testimony brings down John Gotti and many members of the Gambino crime family. So now you have a brief history of the mob. So now let's talk about Gotti, shall we?
Yes.
All right. Any questions as to the
Bring
crime
it.
families?
No.
All right.
No.
We all know
I'm
how
there.
it's going here.
I'm on the
Yeah,
same
well,
page.
All right, let's go.
We're following you.
All right, good deal. So John Joseph Gotti. I already screwed it up. That's okay. We'll start again. John Joseph Gotti Jr. was born on October 27th of 1940 to Philomena, known as Fanny, and John Gotti Sr. in the South Bronx. They were second-generation Italian-American immigrants. And John was the fifth of 13 children.
Damn.
And they pretty much grew up in abject poverty. His father was a day laborer and had a bit of a gambling problem and couldn't seem to be able to keep a job. And the family was constantly moving in order to outrun the bills or the landlords or to avoid paying something. And John grew up in shabby clothes, and he would have to go to school with holes, and they were just ragged. And sometimes he even had to wear mismatched shoes because that's whatever they were able to find. And so because he wasn't a very big kid, he got picked on a lot and teased for how he dressed. And John came to really resent his father for this, for being unable to provide for his family. And the teasing that he experienced filled him with rage. So he did what he would become famous for. He would fight, and fight viciously, violently, and without remorse. In elementary school, he got into a fight and actually crushed part of another child's skull for teasing him.
Good Lord.
And
Shit.
these scrapes earned him a reputation as a tough guy with muscle. At 12, John's family moved to East New York, Brooklyn. Poor, tough, troubled, John began to skip school. Who needs it? And he began to roam the streets. The neighborhood that the Gotti family moved into was controlled by no other than the Gambino crime family. And John, he saw these wise guys on the street. They were always there, and he admired them. They were charismatic. They were big spenders, always had that money in their pocket. They were tough, and they were respected. And they appeared to be untouchable. So John became part of the street gang called the South Brooklyn Boys. And they did some shoplifting and some break-ins, tried to get, the wise guy's attention. And one night, these little idiots, they broke into a construction site. And they thought at, 14 that they were just going to steal them a cement mixer. Well, apparently the vehicle got away from them and it ran over John's foot. And the injury was so bad that he lost a toe. And this injury caused him to walk on the balls of his feet. And that gave him the distinct John Gotti swagger that he would become known for later in life. So, little idiot decided mess around with a cement mixer and you lost your damn toe.
That should have been a clue. Just end it right there. You're done.
Yeah. This should have told you that perhaps you were not going to be the luckiest in your endeavors. So at 16, John said to hell with it. He drops out of school and he started his own street gang, the Fulton Rockaway Boys. And they had a very tough and a very violent reputation. They often fought with rival members of black gangs in the same area. And during one of the fights, one of the Rockaway Boys, John's crew, was stabbed and then chunked out a window.
God almighty.
And then
Damn.
in another, that's how bad these fights were. And then in another fight, it was so vicious that they were fighting so hard that they didn't notice the cops pulling up and they kept fighting. So the cops break it up. And that is the first time that John Gotti is ever arrested. He's arrested for disorderly conduct. But in a stroke of luck, the judge just dismisses the charges. And he's like, y'all quit being idiots and go on your way. And John Gotti walked. So Gotti began to lead the Rockaway Boys. He was used to using intimidation and muscle to get what he wanted. He was the strongest. He was the toughest. He was the most violent. And he was also the smartest, Just because he dropped out of school didn't mean he didn't have a brain in his head. And Carmine Fatico, a capo in the Gambino crime family, decided he'd let John run a few errands for him. Mob was noticing. John had picked up the skill of bookmaking, because his daddy was a degenerate gambler.
Mhm.
And so he became a junior bookie to earn extra cash. And he started setting up the weekly football pots for the kids to participate in. And God forbid if you were the kid that didn't pitch in your quarter. He wasn't afraid to extend credit, and he wasn't afraid to collect on his debts. He's a bookie,
Kids.
a bookie for the kids.
Yeah, for
Kids.
the
Wow.
But somebody was watching. And in the 1950s, the young hood from East New York got noticed by Anello Neil de la Croce. He was the underboss in the Gambino crime family. De la Croce was known as a hitman, an enforcer, and he was second in command. Neil de la Croce approached John and began to have him do small errands for him as well. Oh, and John was starstruck. The underboss saw him, and he admired De La Croce for his toughness and his no-nonsense way of doing business. He was a man's man and a mobster's mobster, and John wanted to be just like him. And in all fairness, De La Croce saw a little something of himself in John as well. Both were shrewd and streetwise and vicious.
I think they said that De La Croce often viewed John as a younger version of himself that he could mold into being
That's right.
just like him.
That's right. He saw John as his new protege. Oh, by the way, they also shared a love of high stakes gambling.
Mm-hmm.
If there was something out there to bet on, they'd bet on it. John has a little bit of his daddy in him, right?
Yeah.
What, Blake?
That's a shocker.
Yeah.
But John wasn't very good at gambling, though, was he?
I got a story about that coming up. So De La Croce made John an enforcer because he'd done such a good job in all the little errands. Don't get that damn quarter. And John busted his ass and his fist to do a good job and impress De La Croce. He used his muscles to collect debts for the mob. But you know what Gotti really wanted? He wanted to be a member of the family as a made man. He loved the lifestyle because it was so different than what he had grown up in. It was so different from his father's lifestyle. Made men had money and cars and clothes and women, and they didn't really seem to have to work too hard for their money. And they were feared. He kind of liked that angle, kind of liked the being feared part. I guess he didn't realize he was already, scaring, kids, 8 to, 22 already. But he was.
Like,
and
please, sir, can I have some more?
Give me a quarter. Whack. So Gotti, in order to try to look like a made man, he began to wear flashy clothes. And child, he even bought him a bright purple suit to wear around. And De La Croce is like, look at him like, what are you wearing?
Just strutting around looking like the Joker.
Because he thought that's what he was supposed to look like. So he was trying.
Hey, how you doing? Look at my new threads.
Yeah. Yeah, I look good, right? I look good. Yeah. And John was definitely a ladies' man.
Mm-hmm.
The women flocked to him. And he just had this over-the-top confidence. He exuded this charisma and this charm. And in 1958, he met the beautiful Victoria de Giorgio. And she was a tough as nails, half Russian, half Italian beauty who had no desire to date a mafia man. She didn't want to date no hood.
No. She did not play either.
No, she did not. But John turned on the charm. And John Gotti was every parent's nightmare. Here shows up this dude that's squatty in his leather jacket with his goofy looking shirt on and, roughed up, he looked crazy. But because Victoria's parents saw that Victoria appeared to be happy, they reluctantly went along with her desire to date John Gotti. And in 1961, John and Victoria had a little baby girl. Her name was Angel. Aww. And in March 6th of 1962, they finally got married. So your slides were a little out of order there, Blake.
Sorry.
That's
God,
okay.
the buttons got backwards.
Yeah. Well, they kind of did things a little out of order. I can see how you would think that in a mob family that you're going to, especially at that time, that you were going to get married first and have the baby second. No, 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 no. They had the baby first. So you can see how he was still kind of Victoria's parents' little nightmare there.
Well, I mean, he always did things on his terms. He wasn't going to do anything traditionally. So he's like, why not do this first and then get married? I ain't got to worry about,
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, even though Victoria had no desire to date a hood or be married to a hood, she did know John's occupation when they got married, and she hated it. She would remind him all the time, I'm only half Italian, and I don't have to put up with your shit. And, okay. And a lot of times she didn't. They fought a lot that first year of marriage. They'd separate, then they come back together. They'd separate, and then they come back together. And it was always whenever John was acting a little bit foolish and getting a little too hood up in the house. And that same year, so right after they got married, after Victoria said, I'm done with you to act like a hood. That same year, Gotti spent 20 days in jail for joyriding in a rental car that he didn't rent. So put you right into jail. Yeah, she wasn't real happy with him.
I bet not.
Imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, and by all accounts, she was not a lady that you wanted to deal with. You got on her
you
bad
didn't want to
side,
piss
so.
Victoria off. No, you did not. You did not want to piss her off. And when Gotti entered mob life as a errand boy, Albert Anastasia ran the crime family. And October 25th, 1957, Anastasia was murdered, allegedly by his underboss, Carlos Gambino. And in the 1960s, Gambino's operation was in full force, and they wanted John. Gotti, in order to make, Victoria happy, he kind of went, and he tries to go legit. I'm so glad he didn't. It wouldn't be so good a story if he did.
Right.
So he started out being a presser in a Coke factory. Well, that didn't last long. And then he signed up to be an assistant to a truck driver. But the street life was in his blood. And he used his route connections that he made as a truck driver's assistant to get on freight docks and hijack freight. Pulling in the truck. He already had the truck. Why not?
I mean,
just like, hey, I got a proposition for you. I know
Yeah.
I'm only an assistant, but let's talk over here real quick.
well, and something tells me that while he was trying to look legit for his wife, he was secretly trying to work an angle. So he gets in that truck and he's like writing down like when the cargo comes in and what cargo it is, and he's just like, now I know. And so now I can take this back to the crime family. And, yeah.
And that is exactly what he did. He became a member of Fatico's crew. And John started becoming a major player and a good earner for the Gambinos, because what he would do was anybody that didn't want to give him dock information or dock access, if he found out they had a marker with the mob, he'd go, hey, you know what? Let's do a little trading. I can get this debt erased, but I need to know when cargo's coming in. I need access, and I need everybody to look the other way. So he became a really good earner. And in 1966, oh, by the way, he was also committing theft of cargo out of the JFK airport as well. So that was somebody else's area, and he was committing theft off the docks, which was another family's area. But in 1966, a Northwest Airlines employee identified John as the person who had been signing for merchandise that didn't belong to him and taking it out of the yard. And so he was arrested.
I'm here to pick up 20 lobsters and 15 Gucci
what's that say?
dresses.
What's that say? What's that say? What's that say? Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, whatever that says, that's what I was supposed to pick up. Yeah. And then so Gotti gets arrested for that. And then 2 months later, while he's out on bail, John's arrested a second time for stealing a truckload of cigarettes worth $50,000 right off the New Jersey Turnpike. He hijacked that truck.
Hey, people got to smoke, Yeah,
So, yeah. And in 1968, he was arrested by the FBI for stealing a container of women's dresses. And he spent 2 years in jail. Now, let me clarify something. It wasn't supposed to be women's dresses in the container. He was supposed to be hijacking a container of fur coats. but somebody got the numbers wrong. And so he goes to jail for, snatching him up a boatload of Sears garments. Probably not in his size.
Not the Sears garments.
Instead of the minks and chinchillas and foxes that he was supposed to get.
Come
spent
on,
2 years in
Kmart.
jail. Yeah, he spent 2 years in jail for basically, snatching the Sears special. Yeah.
Like I stole the truck going to Fashion Bug. What the hell?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He stole the Dress Barn stuff instead of the Neiman Marcus crap.
He caught so much hell for that shit.
Oh, he was teased in jail. He was. So, but he did his time and he kept his mouth shut for the mob. And this gave him some credibility and it earned the respect of Gambino. And in 1972, he leaves prison and he goes right back and rejoins his club, which was stationed out of what's known as the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club. And that was just kind of this social club, kind of just like a building that they rented that they kind of all hung out in and discussed business. And in 73, Gambino gives John Gotti a chance. He gives him his very first important, no questions asked, assignment. You see, Gambino's nephew was murdered, and Carlos Gambino wanted revenge. And Gotti was tasked with the hit on a man named James McBradney. Again, a no questions asked job. Gotti jumped at the chance because he knew that this could make him a made man. The boss asked him for a favor. So they find McBradney. And he's sitting in a bar in Staten Island. And they walk in saying, hey, you know what? We're the police. We got to go outside. And nobody believed they were police. No. So just to make their point, they shot the gun up in the air to kind of get everybody's attention, get McBradney to turn around. And again, still nobody's believing they're the police. And so McBradney's kind of like, hey, what are you doing? What? And he's shot right in the head before he finishes his drink. Problem, he did it in front of a bar full of patrons. So there's a lot of witnesses to this crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was John Gotti's first murder. Although there is some discussion as to who might have actually pulled the trigger. And 1 year later, Gotti and 2 other men were arrested for James McBradney's murder. Gambino, and of course, they go to jail. So Gambino rewards Gotti's loyalty by hiring him a lawyer named Ray Combe to represent him at trial. And Combe made his reputation 20 years prior as being Joseph McCartney's right-hand man. He was tough, shrewd, and wickedly smart. Wickedly smart. He had already represented several of their high-priced mobsters. And Combs works his legal magic. And John Gotti's charge of murder is pled down to attempted manslaughter, and he only serves 2 years in jail. I don't know how it's attempted manslaughter because the asshole's dead.
Yeah.
Well, I think that they said that, from what I remember, they said that it was because he was there and they couldn't really get him for manslaughter because he didn't pull the trigger.
Again,
so they had to get him for something
as to who pulled the trigger.
Yeah, they had to get him for something, so they kind of figured out, well, I mean, I guess this is probably the best we can get him on.
So, Gambino noticed. Go ahead, Blake.
I was going to say, there's got to be a little bit of a luck there with that, too. I know that sounds horrible to say about a murder.
He
but
did a favor for the boss.
Like...
He fulfilled what the boss asked. He did a job that the boss wanted to see if he would do it. No questions asked. And at that point, Gambino did not know if John Gotti was fully omerta or not.
Yeah.
So he hired him a good lawyer as a thank you for what you did for me.
Yeah.
And whenever John Gotti was sitting in jail, he didn't say a word. He did whatever he had to do for the family. However, in 1976, while Gotti is serving out his sentence, Carlos Gambino dies of a heart attack. The guy who was going to make Gotti a made man, dead. And Gambino's successor is Paul Castellano.
I think I got a picture of him.
Paul Castellano is a problem. Yeah, that's him.
Mm-hmm.
In July of 1977, John is released from jail, and Castellano agrees that John Gotti has proven his loyalty to the family and elevates Gotti to the status of capo regime, also known as a capo, and makes him the leader of his own crew in Queens. Gotti has now become a made man, and he takes the vow of omerta, and he is part of the family. Carlos Gambino had no idea that promoting Gotti was the same as signing his own death warrant. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I was going to say, and they didn't really particularly care for each other either, to begin with.
No, they did not.
Not to begin
no,
with.
No, they did not. That's what I'm saying. Castellano is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So with Castellano as the boss, some of the members of the Gambino family didn't think that Castellano had earned the right to be the boss. They thought that it should have gone to Neil Della Croce, who had been the underboss. And that included Gotti. Gotti thought that Della Croce should be the underboss, and he had been passed over for the position.
I know one of the things that they said is that Castellano read the Wall Street Journal, and some of the mobsters were like, "What kind of mobster reads the Wall Street Journal?" And that was one of their bones of contention that they had.
Yes,
with him.
that is actually very true, and that was something that a lot of the mobsters didn't even know how to read it. But Paul Castellano wanted to run the mob like a business, and anyway, that again, you're right. Point of contention. Paul Castellano is a problem. So now that he's out of jail, Victoria's again like, why don't you get a real job? Why don't you get a legitimate job? Why you got to be hanging out with your hood friends all day? I don't know what you're doing. What are you doing, John? What are you doing, John? So John, in order to make his lovely wife happy, takes a position at a construction company. And of course, that's also to keep the conditions of his parole, satisfied. And of course, this position was mob owned. So it's kind of like, yeah, you get a paycheck. You don't necessarily have to show up, but we'll say you were here. And at that point, Victoria didn't care. She was pretty sure she had a job and money was coming in, and the family was beginning to live a good life. The couple now had 5 children: Angel, Victoria, John Jr., Frankie, and Peter. And by all accounts, when John wasn't in jail, he actually was a doting father and just adored his children. And they wanted for nothing. They got everything. Big Christmases, big vacations. They could point at it and it was theirs. And they adored him right back. All of them to this day, if you've seen interviews with them, will say how much they loved and adored their father, that he was the king. And one of the little boys, John had kind of a special place in his heart for his son, Frank. He called him Frankie. Frankie was a really smart little boy, and he had a sweet smile, and he loved sports, and he adored his dad. He wanted to always be with John. And John would walk around saying, hey, Frankie, he's going to become a doctor or a senator. He's going to be something big, he's going to be something big. He was John's light and always put a smile on John's face. Here we go, guys. So on March 18th of 1980, tragedy befell the Gotti family. And the story of what happened to little Frankie begins and ends with a blind spot. A man named John Favaro, who was a decent, hardworking man from Howard Beach, Queens. He worked at a convertible factory in New Hyde Park, Long Island. He and his wife, Janet, were loving parents to 2 adopted kids. And Favaro was back friends there, who lived on the other side of the fence from him, was John and Victoria Gotti. In fact, John Favaro's older son, Scott, was a sleepover buddy with John Gotti's oldest son, John Gotti Jr. So on March 18th, 1980, Favaro finished his shift at the convertible factory and drove the 13 miles home. He turned off onto the boulevard and into the glare of the setting sun. 10 minutes earlier, little Frankie Gotti had jumped on the mini back of a neighborhood kid named Kevin McMahon. And he was buzzing up and down the streets and the sidewalks. And he was giggling and laughing. And he was having a good time. He was being a kid, just zipping in and out. And 6 blocks from the house, Frankie Gotti motored through a home renovation job site where a construction dumpster was set out on the curb. The boy went over the curb, and into the street, just beyond the dumpster, and into the sun glare blind spot of Fabra. And little Frankie was hit and died in the street. Sorry, you guys, you know I have a problem with kid stuff. Now, there are many different things to the story. Some say that Fabra was drunk. There's no proof that Fabra was drunk. Some say that the little boy was dragged. There is no evidence that the little boy was dragged. He hit little Frankie on the motorbike because he just didn't see him and he just didn't have time to stop. And the little boy was killed. Now, in 1980, John Gotti was still 5 years away from his front page infamy. But Fabra was well aware of John Gotti's rising kind of mob star status. And by all reasonable accounts, Fabra felt awful. He was horrified at having played a role in any child's death, whether it was Gotti's kid or not. He killed a kid, and you know, John Ryan, just kind of like what you said, that John Gotti, they lived by their own rules. And it said that John Gotti's wife Victoria began to demand an eye for an eye. She was telling John, "You go kill him. You kill him. He killed my baby. You kill him." She started begging John to kill the son of a bitch that killed her baby. 2 days after the accident, a woman, an unidentified woman, called the local police precinct and told them that Fabra was going to be eliminated. And Fabra thinks that this is crazy when the cops come to warn him about it. And he's telling them, those things only happen in the movies. What do you mean? But the cops thought the threat credible enough to come and tell him. Then he began to get anonymous threats by phone and then by mail. And Victoria Gotti would stand at the back fence and glare at him. And she was incensed that Fabra continued to drive the car that had hit and killed her child. A photo of little Frankie Gotti's mass and funeral service was put in Fabra's mailbox. And on May 22nd, someone spray painted the word murderer on his car. So Fabra, he's getting a little nervous. And he seeks advice from a boyfriend, a boyhood friend whose father was a mob captain. And the dude told him, he told Fabra, get rid of the car and leave town and do it now. Go ahead.
Well, they also told him too, when the funeral happened, I know the Gottis were very upset because Fabra did not even come and offer condolences or anything about what had happened. But he actually had friends who were in the mob, and he was like talking to them, and they were like, look,
do not
just stay away. They're upset.
Yep.
Don't even bother. Don't even go around them. Let it calm down and then maybe go do that. But right now it's too hot of a topic, too touchy of a subject. Just stay away. And so he followed the advice of other mobsters.
Yeah.
And, got him in trouble.
But never, ever underestimate a mother's love for her child. Because you see, Victoria Gotti saw Fabra outside one day, and she grabbed a baseball bat and began to beat the living hell out of him. She attacked him in the driveway and just started to beat the shit out of him. Fabra then decided it was probably time to put the house up for sale. And funny enough, a buyer very quickly materialized, and the legal paperwork was expedited. And his closing was scheduled for the last day of July. And on July the 25th, John and Victoria Gotti allegedly left New York for a Florida vacation. They chose to grieve someplace a little more pleasant than New York. And after work on July 28th, Fabra walked from the furniture factory down to the diner 2 blocks away where he had parked his car. And a van pulled up. He was hit in the head, yanked into the van, and it sped away. Strangely enough, his car disappeared too. The man in the car were never seen again. And detectives spoke to the Gottis when they returned from Florida on allegedly August the 4th. And Victoria says, I don't know what happened to him, but I'm not sorry something did. He never sent me a card. He never apologized. He never even got his car fixed. All John looked at them and said was, he killed my kid. And over the years, the mafia stool pigeons kind of, started, metering out stories about what happened to Fabra. Some say he was entombed in concrete and dumped at sea, literally sleeping with the fishes. Another one says that he was dissolved in a vat of acid and in the basement of, and it was still in the basement of someone's workshop. Now, John Gotti's brother, Gene, is actually believed to have been among the mob men who abducted and killed Favre. But one that I'd found that I'd never heard before from a relatively credible source was that Gene actually did abduct him, but he waited for John to get home so that John could personally saw him in half alive with a chainsaw.
Good God.
Jesus.
And does John Gotti seem like the kind that would let that go without him personally punishing it?
No.
But what happened to John Favre to this day is still a mystery.
You know, and Gotti, actually, that was a playwright out of Capone's playbook whenever the St. Valentine's Day Massacre happened. He was in Florida on vacation. I have nothing to do with this. I have no idea what happened.
Sure was.
Allegedly. So
still to this day, they have no idea.
Never found the body, never found the car, never found anything of this man. Wow. Nothing. Nothing. Now, while John was having a problem, the Gambino family also had a problem. In 1980, fed up with all the mob violence in the streets, the FBI formed a special task force and assigned a team to each of the 5 families. The Gambinos had a family, the Caseys, the Bonanos, the Genovese, and the Colombos all had... I knew I'd get it.
Sorry, I had to get to that.
I had to go down on my fingers. They each had a special FBI team assigned to them. And the goal, shut down the mob. Now, underboss Neil Delacroix had been on the FBI's radar since the 60s and the 70s. And now the FBI was actually able to link him to murder, gambling, and loan sharking. They were also paying attention to all of his associates, and that included Gotti. But Gotti was thinking about other things. Like a pretty little brunette named Sharon Garillo. Sharon was a married woman and also the illegitimate daughter of his mentor, Neil Delacroix. So this brazen motherfucker was going to break all the mob rules. You didn't mess with, and by the way, she was married to another mobster. You didn't mess with another mobster's wife. Gotti's like, You don't mess with someone's daughter that she boss. Gotti was like, And Shannon was on John's arm at nightclubs and restaurants and all the New York hotspots. And because Delacroix saw John as kind of a younger version of himself, he allowed it. But the relationship soon ended. And Gotti quickly replaced her with a string of other young, beautiful women. See, Gotti loved the nightlife. He loved to gamble. And if he wasn't, and he loved to gamble too. Sorry, I'm going to tell you that story. I was going to tell you in a minute. The thing was, Gotti was not a good gambler. But he loves the high stakes gambling. I mean, if there was a game or a horse race or a freaking cockfight, John Gotti had a marker on it and had a bet somewhere in that game. It was alleged that he would bet on anything. And the joke around the Bergen Hunt Fish Club was that John would lose a bet on what color underwear he had on. And he did lose. And he lost a lot. He reportedly lost over $100,000 in one card game. And over $20,000 on one single bet.
And that was in 1980s money. So
that was 1980s money.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was a terrible gambler. He was terrible at it. But he liked to do it. And now Delacroix was still being surveilled at the Ravenite Social Club. That's where Delacroix's, people were headquarters. John's was at the Bergen Hunt Fish Club, and Delacroix's was at the Ravenite Social Club. And at the Ravenite, everything and everyone coming and going out of that building was being documented. And in 1981, the FBI had managed to place a bug in the Bergen Hunt Fish Club as well. And they were actively listening to John Gotti's conversations. But again, John Gotti, again, now had a potentially much bigger problem than the FBI. Now, what in the world could that be? Paul Castellano, the boss. See, Gotti and his crew had been selling drugs, specifically heroin. And Castellano, like most of the other mob bosses did, had a very strict no drug dealing, no drugs policy. It brought too much attention. It was considered dirty money. And it got way too much attention, both by the FBI and the NYPD.
Mm-hmm.
Paul was so adamant that no one in the family sell drugs that the penalty for doing so was death. But Gotti had ignored the orders, and you don't ignore the boss's orders. So Gotti and Castellano had come to hate each other. Castellano thought Gotti was disruptive and flashy and disrespectful. And Gotti thought Castellano was too reclusive and too greedy. Now, Gotti was right on the greedy part. Castellano was making $200,000 to $300,000 a month and still demanding more from the family. The family thought Castellano wasn't trickling down the money like it should be, and that, his cut was just a little too big. But Della Croce kept the peace, and as long as he was the underboss, Gotti was protected from Castellano's wrath. But one night, one of the cops caught one of Gotti's friends, Willie Boy Johnson, with $50,000 and a stash of drugs in his car.
Oh, shit.
And the police were aware that Willie Boy was a friend of Gotti's. So they decided to use Willie. See, Willie Boy couldn't become a made man because he had a Native American heritage. He wasn't Italian. So they decided that they would give him an offer. If he'd inform, he doesn't go to jail. So Willie Boy took on a very dangerous game. He decided he'd play both sides of the coin.
Never ends well.
Nope.
He'd be an informer on Gotti's crew on small things, enough to satisfy the cops, while still taking part in activities that make him some cash. And, it had seemed pretty easy to flip Willie Boy, so the FBI focused on another one of Gotti's childhood friends, a member of the crew named Angelo Ruggiero. Now, Ruggiero had been given the name Quack Quack because this dude could not shut the F up. He was known for just talking, and he was constantly talking. He never shut up. He was also known as an instigator. He liked to, and we all know the person, it's like, dude, if you would just shut up, your life would be so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But he always had something to say, and he always thought somebody wanted to hear what he said. Was that you? Okay, well, I didn't want to just say your name right out loud, Blake. I'm going to call you Quack Quack Smith.
Quack, quack.
Yeah.
Quack, quack,
So
bitches.
anyway, because he wouldn't shut up, he's called Quack Quack. And the FBI learned that Ruggiero, because they caught him on a work tap because he couldn't shut the F up. He was talking about, oh, yeah, you know what? Oh, excuse me. I got a good voice. I won't ever get pinched by the mob because you know what? I don't make phone calls on my phone. I make them on my daughter's pink princess phone. The FBI will never think to tap that one. Guess what the FBI decided to tap?
Yeah. Like you just blew your own cover. You played yourself.
It's true. They had not
Wow.
thought to tap Ruggiero's daughter's pink princess phone in her room. But they did now. So now Gotti's crew had been infiltrated. And everywhere Gotti and his crew went, the government was watching and listening. Now, Gotti was known to have a hair-trigger temper. And anyone who angered him quickly realized that they had made a seriously big mistake. The FBI had busted up a mob-run craps game and arrested several of Gotti's crew members. And Gotti is heard via wiretap, and he is furious. He is cursing them all. He's saying, I hope the MFers stay in jail. I hope they rot. I should kill their mothers, crap like that. And you can go and hear those FBI surveillance tapes. If you go to the FBI surveillance.com, you can actually hear some of these mob tapes that have been made public that were used. They are fascinating. And you know what? It's really interesting. A lot of them really sound like Joe Pesci. A lot of those mobsters sound like freaking Joe Pesci. It really does. I found that interesting. In September 1984, a Gotti associate went into a Queen's bar to talk to a crew chief. And his car blocked in 39-year-old Romuald Pychek's vehicle. And Romeo Pacek was just, he was a refrigeration mechanic, and he was needing to get home. And when the associate of Gotti's came out, they got into a screaming match. Pacek wanted out. The guy would say, yeah, I'll move my car. I want to move my car. Get over it. Forget about it. I'll be back in a minute, whatever. And they have a screaming match in front of this bar. Gotti could hear him. And Gotti was pissed. So Gotti intervened. He walked straight into the street between the two men that were screaming and sucker punched Pacek right upside the head. Oh, well, Pacek wasn't going to stand for that. He went straight to the police and reported it, and John Gotti was arrested. Pacek had no idea that he had just had arrested by the cops.
God almighty.
And the cops decided to prosecute Gotti for assault. It was minor, but again, Gotti was drawing unnecessary and unwanted attention to the Gambino family. Now, there's more to come on that trial. Any questions so far?
But I bet when Pacek found out who he was shaking like a dog shitting peach seeds. I know he was probably.
We're going to get to that.
Let me check my notes I've been taking so far real quick. Nope, I think I'm good. No questions.
Am I keeping it pretty clear?
Yeah.
We're following the story? Good. Mm-hmm. So about that time, there was a new U.S. attorney, and his name was Rudy Giuliani. And he had decided that he was going to bring cases against Gotti based on the bugs that were in Angelo Ruggiero's home. Gotti and 9 others were arrested again, and then they were charged with racketeering under the newly established RICO law. And RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organization. And these laws allowed the government or the police to indict and prosecute an entity instead of just a person. So this means that they could put all the families under one umbrella because they had a commission that oversaw all the families' businesses and they ran it. So they wanted, because they had picked up Gotti, they now wanted their little double agent, Willie Boy, to testify against the mob. Willie Boy shit himself.
As would I.
Willie Boy Johnson, while he was cool with being a double agent, working both sides, he was terrified. It was cool to be a side rat, but it was one thing, completely another thing to testify in open court and it be known that you're a rat. Mm-hmm. And the one thing he said he would never do was he said he would never testify against John Gotti. So word had gotten back to Paul Castellano that Ruggiero had been caught on a wiretap talking about selling heroin. And Castellano wanted to hear the tapes. He put pressure on Gotti, said, man, that's your crew. I want to hear the tapes. Go get the tapes. Go find the lawyer. Go bring me the tapes. He wanted to hear the tapes. Now, Gotti keeps trying to put him off because Gotti knows that he's implicated as well, because he's going to say, Gotti said I could sell heroin on there. And as long as Castellano didn't hear the tapes, Castellano couldn't be sure that Gotti had okayed it. At the same time, because of the RICO case, Castellano is now hit with an indictment. And they scooped up all 5 leaders of all 5 crime families in this RICO case, and all of them were indicted. So Castellano knows that this is not going well. He's heard the evidence, and by now he's heard the tapes. So while he's out on bail awaiting trial, the underboss and Gotti protector, Neil De La Croce, dies of lung cancer. Castellano immediately summons Gotti to his home. Oh, shit. So Gotti's nervous. He didn't know what would happen. Was he going to be named the underboss? Was he going to be whacked? And during the meeting, Castellano tells Gotti that Tommy Bellotti was going to be named the new underboss and that he would now be reporting to him. He also tells Gotti that his crew is going to be dismantled and it's going to be redistributed into other crews. That's not good. Suddenly, they have no use for you. Gotti had already been hearing rumors that the boss was going to have him killed, and he knew he had to act. And in a typical bold and brazen John Gotti fashion, he decides he's going to kill mob boss Paul Castellano. What do you think? Kill or be killed?
I think he was.
Yeah, I think that's. I honestly think that's the situation he's in at this point. I mean,
I think he was down the right track. Yeah.
Yeah. So now killing a mob boss is forbidden. So he recruits Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano to go with him and secretly meet with the members of other New York mob families, kind of to ask permission. The Genovese family was the only one that wasn't included because, you see, boss, he was a friend with Paul Castellano. That's Vinny the Chin. Sorry for those of you who are listening. I just made the Chin sign because you're not supposed to say his name. I was trying to follow the Omerta rules. Vinny the Chin was a friend of Paul Castellano. And Gotti knew that if he even mentioned it to Chin would probably kill him on the spot. So after taking the bold step of talking to the families, amazingly enough, the families said that they would not interfere. Because, see, Paul Castellano had been pissing them off as well. Seems like his cut was getting too big. The redistribution between not only their families, but his family and their families didn't exactly seem as fair as it should have.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't going to stand in Gotti's way. So Gotti puts together 5 trusted supporters and hatches a plan to kill the boss. Not only to kill the boss, but to kill the boss of the most dangerous and the most violent and the wealthiest family in New York. Bitch had balls. That's all I got to say, that bitch had balls.
Yeah.
They called themselves the Fist because there were 5 of them. And mission number 1, kill Paul Castellano. December 16th, 1985. Castellano, coincidentally, the underboss as well, are headed to Sparks Steakhouse for a meeting in Midtown. But they had been duped. There was no meeting. It was a setup. Gotti had 4 men in long trench coats and large furry Cossack hats on their heads. I know it sounds strange, but there was a method to his madness. He wanted them in memorable clothes so that witnesses would remember how they were dressed and not what they looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And at 5:26 p.m., Castellano and Bellotti arrived at Sparks Steakhouse in the middle of rush hour traffic, and gunfire erupted. When the shooting stopped, Gambino mob boss Paul Castellano and underboss Tommy Bellotti lay dead on the dirty New York City streets, and the culprits disappeared into the crowd. So within 2 days, the news agencies began to speculate that John Gotti might be behind the killings. Now, how the hell they knew that, I don't know. But you can go and find the news footage. And you see him. And men are looking, the police are looking for this man, John Gotti, who is alleged to have been behind the murder of Paul Castellano. It's like, what? And funniest one guy gets on there, Paul Castellano rubbed out in the street. I go, that sounds dirty. You got to go back and watch some of this old news footage. It's fantastic.
I mean, I would guess, though, too, they also had people who were on the inside of these mafia groups that were feeding information to the news agencies as well. I mean, because if they're going to rat to the government, they're probably going to rat to their local news.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was laughing a while ago because I had a reference in my head when you were like, they're the Fist. And I was going to make a comment that Shelley would not have gotten. But
I probably wouldn't have.
Because Ryan, I was going to be like, they got the 5 stones.
Thanos.
It's going to snap their fingers real quick and get rid of him.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Except this time the Infinity Gauntlet was guns. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know what y'all are talking about.
Anyway. It's a Marvel thing.
Okay, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. So Castellano's dead. The underboss Bellotti is dead. So Gotti gets messages to Castellano's supporters that there will be no retaliation if they get in line and support John Gotti as the new boss. And let them know that now they answer to him. John Gotti was the new boss, and he moved fast. Gotti wanted the commission's approval as the new Gambino family boss. And the families appear to approve of the change of power. Even Vinny the Chin Gigante of the Genovese crime family, he reluctantly accepts Gotti as the new boss. But as he shakes his hand to leave, he leans down and says to Gotti, someday, someone will have to pay for Paul Castellano's murder. Oh, shit.
And that's not the one you want to tell you that either.
Not Vinny the Chin. The only one worse than Gotti telling you that would have been Vinny the Chin.
Mm-hmm.
That dude was known to do some, allegedly. Anyway, we're not talking about him. On December the 24th, 1985, Gotti had all of the members come to the Ravenite Social Club to declare their loyalty to the new boss. Oh, the FBI was thrilled. They sat outside and photographed everyone entering that building.
Of course they did.
Gotti was unwittingly helping the FBI.
Yeah.
It's kind of
From the
comical. I'm
moment
sorry.
that Gotti took control as the boss, he was up to his eyeballs in legal trouble.
It's like, come and worship thee. Here, FBI is a smorgasbord of the people you need to arrest.
Yeah, the FBI's like, oh, shit. Snap, 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 snap.
It's like we couldn't have done any better if we tried.
Yes, there was no way they could have gathered them all up in one place like that. But Gotti says, come and adore me. And they come to adore him.
Like,
and the FBI's like, hell yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what it was, Ryan. It was come and kiss the ring.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what it was. So again, Gotti was up to his eyeballs in legal trouble. But you'd never know it by looking at him. He began to wear $2,000 tailored suits, $1,000 pairs of shoes. He always made sure that his hair was perfectly coiffed. He even wore monogrammed socks. He wasn't no punk ass bitch. He was looking good. He was building his reputation in the neighborhood. He began to be known to throw huge backyard parties, huge 4th of July parties, complete with fireworks. Now, how he got the permit for that, I'm not exactly sure.
He don't need no permit. He's John Gotti. He'll do whatever the hell he wants.
He would give money to the little old ladies in the neighborhood to help them out with groceries and rent and electricity. And he gave money to charities and the local Little League, and the public ate it up. Gotti was thought as a modern day Robin Hood, in the Queens community at least. He began to be called the Dapper Don. His good looks and his sharp dress and swagger, and that irresistible charm. Child, I know every time he came on the screen, I'm like, it's Gotti. It's John Gotti. Oh my God, he's so handsome. Oh my God. Oh, look how cute he is. I was quite smitten and in love. And he was gaining fans everywhere he went, and he loved it. Everyone seemed to be enamored with John Gotti, including little old me watching it on the television. Well, everyone's enamored with John Gotti except for, the FBI and the police and those who really knew him well. But even in the FBI and the police, Gotti had his fans there too. In March of 1986, Gotti went on trial for the first time as a mob boss for the Gambino crime family for felony assault. Gee, when did that happen? Remember Romuald Pycek?
Mm-hmm.
The guy that Gotti had sucker punched in a parking dispute. Well, it was time to have the trial. Now, whenever Pycek went to the cops, Gotti was just a mobster. But now Pycek was going up against the freaking boss. I mean, in all honesty, Pycek had to have been shitting himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shit.
And if he didn't know who Gotti was before, he definitely knew who Gotti was now. Now, strangely enough, just before the trial, Pycek had some kind of shoulder injury and had to have shoulder surgery. And prior to the hearing, he claimed that now he seemed to have, he forgot. He forgot the entire incident, and he just couldn't remember anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the judge looks at Pychek and he says, "Do you see anyone in this courtroom that was your assailant?" And Pychek, "No." So the judge looks at him again. He says, "Do you see anyone in this courtroom that you recognize?" "No." The judge dismisses the charges and Gotti walks.
I mean, can you blame Pychek?
The next day, the headlines in the newspaper said, "For Gotti." Because he forgot. He couldn't remember nothing.
For Gotti.
For Gotti. Those were the headlines. I forgot. That were the headlines in the New York Times, the New York Daily News. So Gotti's men had gotten to Pychek. So you see, Gotti was already working his influence. And Pychek was just kind of like, man, I'm real sorry. I must have been drunk or on something. I mean, I think you're a cool dude. Hey, thanks for not killing me that night. We're calling square.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would not have wanted to be in Ronald Pychek's shoes.
Mm-mm.
No, and had he said anything, his shoes might have been cement at that point.
Mm-hmm. So, and that would have probably been the last thing that he saw.
Mm-hmm.
So on September 25th, 1986, the second trial for racketeering begins. And during the jury selection, a car bomb explodes and kills Gotti's underboss, Frank DelChico. But the bomb was actually meant for Gotti. The car bomb had the feds and the mob confused because in 1931, the mob commission had forbidden the use of car bombs because they were too messy. They drew too much attention. It was much easier to just whack somebody in the alley and then dispose of the body. The cops never know. But you blow up a car, the police are coming. So, and the penalty for, using a car bomb and being messy was death. It seemed like you screwed up the mob anyway. Penalty's death. You're done.
Well, they don't want any loose ends. They want to get rid of anybody who's too wild or too unpredictable.
So the FBI was worried that this was the beginning of another mob war and that mob war was going to play out on the streets of New York. But the truth was Vinny the Chin Gigante. He had attempted to take revenge for Paul Castellano's murder. He, without the approval of all the other families, had put out a hit. He'd authorized the hit on Gotti in retaliation. But he hired an idiot for a hitman because, you see, the hitman misidentified DelChico as Gotti. And whenever DelChico got into the car, he hits the button and he blows up the car with the wrong dude inside.
God almighty.
Wow.
What a dumbass.
It's like one of those, like, you have one order.
You had one
job.
You had a job.
You had one
and now
job.
You can't ever do it again because Gotti's now watching.
Yeah.
Gotti will make himself 10 times more difficult to get to. So as the trial continues, Gotti's attorney, Bruce Cutler, he describes John as a neighborhood businessman that just made good. He worked hard. He earned his money. And, all these people that are testifying against him, they are lowlifes and degenerates and drug dealers and they're mobsters. He calls the people testifying against Gotti mobsters as if it's a bad thing. And this trial was a circus. The courtroom was filled with media and Gotti supporters and even curious onlookers. And John Gotti couldn't get enough. He would smile and shake hands and sign autographs on his way into court. He craved this limelight. He loved reading about himself in the papers. He would take an extra suit to court so he could change during breaks in the courtroom proceedings so he could always look impeccable. He read an article about the trial, and the only thing that annoyed him in the article was that it reported that Gotti got his hair cut every other day. Allegedly, Gotti flung the paper across the room in frustration and loudly protested, "I get a haircut every day. They should know that and report accurately."
Wow.
He got his haircut every day.
Vain.
You probably think the song is about you.
So Gotti was the boss of the richest crime family with an income of over of tens of millions every year. And he wanted everyone except the feds to know it. He began to see himself as a movie star. He was friends with John Amos. I don't know if y'all know who John Amos is. Think of Good Times. He was the dad on Good Times. Okay. He was also friends with Brando. Go figure. He even invited Frank Sinatra to dinner one night. But unfortunately, Frank Sinatra said he was ill and couldn't attend. So he declined John Gotti's offer. Gotti was livid. How dare Sinatra turn him down? And Gotti allegedly sent some of his buddies over there to threaten Sinatra for pretending to be sick to get out of dinner with him and disrespecting him. Gotti was hooked on the fame. And the other bosses did not like it one bit, preferring that their businesses be low-key and invisible. By operating in the shadows, they've been able to thrive and survive and make it harder for the authorities to investigate and incarcerate them. And they thought Gotti was a show-off. But Gotti believed he was untouchable, and he damn near was. He was a modern-day Al Capone, whom he idolized. I mean, come on, he's Snorky 2.0. How you like me throwing that reference in? Massacre?
Snorky.
He was impeccable dresser. He was a Snorky 2.0. Again, Al Capone was his idol. And so he thought of himself as kind of a modern day Al Capone. I think it's funny, Ryan, because you didn't know I was going to tell you all that. And you made that connection immediately. So now that he needed an underboss and needed somebody to have his back, he decided to name Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano as his new underboss. And with Sammy in place, Gotti knew his back was covered, and he continued on with celebrity antics. The family bosses knew John had become a problem. They told Gotti to quiet down and stop doing interviews. So what does Gotti do? He appears on the cover of Time magazine with the caption, "The Mob on Trial." John was like, "Ah!"
Don't tell me what to do. I'll do it. I'll tell you what to do.
Yep. Quiet down, John. Don't do interviews. Well, I'm already going to be on the cover. Forget about it. I'm on the cover of Time magazine. What do you want? Give me the voice, Ryan. I can't do it.
Forget about it. I'm going to cover a fucking Time magazine. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. You go get your own magazine. I've got this one, you know.
And next week I'll be on People. What the fuck you going to do about it? Nothing.
That's right. It was easy for John to smile because after the jury for the trial was chosen, a juror named George Pape approached Gotti's men and just let him know that for a mere, let's say, $60,000, he was willing to vote not guilty. 11 months later, the trial was over. John Gotti was acquitted.
You don't say.
Delivered the payment, and George Pape secreted away $60,000 richer.
Now, do we know what happened to George Pape? Did he?
He shut up and he shut his ass and he moved away.
I'm saying, but do we know if he was he ever prosecuted later? Was he ever?
I believe he moved out. Like, I'm going to live in Jamaica now out. You know?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't find anything else on him. But again, he kept quiet. And this wasn't known until way later. This wasn't known until probably 10, 15 years later, whenever Sammy the Bull was just really started chirping.
Yeah.
So George Pape could have already been dead at that point.
Sure.
But Gotti had beaten the law again. He was becoming a folk hero. He was the guy that was sticking it to the government, you know, and the neighborhood loved him for it. They were claiming that he did a better job of keeping their streets safe than the police did because their neighborhood was crime-free. Now, who the hell's going to come break in John Gotti's neighborhood?
Nobody.
No.
Not me.
Hell no.
So, folk hero John Gotti looked the part, dressed the part. He was very quotable in the papers, and he was always available to his adoring fans. The media dubbed him the Teflon Don because the government couldn't seem to make any damn charges stick. And the crowds cheered as he walked out of the courtroom. And the feds were pissed. Gotti was making them look foolish.
Oh, yeah.
And the new mantra around the FBI office was "Get Gotti." And this is from one of the FBI agents. There's a fantastic documentary on Netflix about John Gotti, and they are interviewing the FBI agents who were actually on the Gambino task force. And they said that they were so angry about it that every day they're like, "We're going to get Gotti. We're going to get Gotti." That was like what they said every day. "We're going to get Gotti. Get Gotti." So that became the mantra in the FBI crime office. And in 1988, Gotti decided to move his headquarters out of the lowly Bergen Hunt and Fish Club to the upscale Manhattan Ravenite Social Club that had once been occupied by his mentor, Neil De La Croce. Now, Sammy the Bull, this dude was smart. He is smart. And he didn't like this move one bit. He told Gotti that maybe, we should just, play it down a little bit. Maybe we should stay at the Bergen Hunt and Fish and just kind of keep quiet for a little while. But Gotti wanted to. He wanted to look and be seen. He wanted to be impressive. He wanted to be in the fancier digs in a more upper scale area. And so the headquarters was moved to the Ravenite Social Club.
Drawing a lot of unwanted attention to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, it wasn't unwanted. He absolutely wanted
Well, I mean, from his mind's point, he absolutely wanted it. But I'm talking about the organization as a whole.
Now, interestingly enough, that year someone shot and killed Willie Boy Johnson.
I wonder why.
But he ultimately paid the ultimate price for being a rat. So the case that was going to come up, that Willie Boy was going to have to testify against Gotti in, charges were dismissed. Never brought to trial. The witness was dead. Also, the feds bugged the Ravenite Club and listened day and night to see if they could catch something, anything incriminating on John Gotti, because the thing was, get Gotti. Gotti was onto it, though. When he had real business he had to discuss, he and the necessary associate, they'd take a walk. They'd go take a walk. Gotti was smart. Yeah. And Gotti was so arrogant that whenever he went on these little walks to discuss mob business, if he spotted the FBI surveillance van, he'd stop and smile. And he'd wave at him. Sometimes he'd pose. Sometimes he'd tap on the window and make some small talk. "Hey, how you doing today? You having a nice day in the van?" He would talk to them. And then sometimes he'd let them think that he didn't see them, only to come around the other side of the van, tap on the, "Here, y'all look like you need some coffee. You got to stay up so you don't miss nothing. I know it's a hard job. Have some coffee on me." Giving them coffee.
I wouldn't have taken that coffee. No. He could have poisoned that.
He took great delight in smart-assing the feds, and seemed to enjoy this kind of high-stakes game of cat and mouse that he was part of. And Gotti now had a new edict for the family. All the men in the family must pay their respects to him at least once a week in person. And the mobsters would line up outside the Ravenite, go in, wait their turn and go in, and basically kiss John Gotti's ass. And the feds snapped pictures. Now that this was the new edict, once a week, they were finding out members of the Gambino family they didn't even know existed. People that they had never heard of, never seen. Well, because they were now being brought out into the open, Gotti was forcing them there. These guys had done perfectly. They'd operated in the shadows. They'd stay low level. But now, guess what? They were on the radar. And with all the bugs on Mulberry Street and in the Ravenite Social Club, the FBI was beginning to collect evidence needed to get Gotti. They found out that Gotti would also have conversations in the apartment above the club. It was owned by an elderly widow of a Gambino crime family member. And when the feds found out she'd be traveling for the Thanksgiving holiday, they snuck in and planted a bug. On December 11th of 1990, the feds had enough evidence, so they raided Gotti's club and arrested him and Sammy Gravato and the others inside. And as New York Police Department Detective Joe Coffey is loading Gotti's ass into the patrol car to take him down to the station, Gotti stops, kind of looks at him, and says, "I'll give you a 3-1 I beat this," and gets in the car. At this point, Gotti is charged with the murders of Paul Castellano, underboss Tommy Bellotti, and the feds had a plan. They were going to entice the underboss and co-defendant, Sammy the Bull Gravano, to turn state's evidence and become a rat. See, again, Sammy's smart. He's tough. He'd been a killer before becoming an underboss. He was an enforcer. And he's the enforcer you didn't want to see walk through the door. He was known not only for his toughness, but for his ability to stay alive in very bad situations. Gravano was facing life in prison if he didn't cooperate. He wasn't sure. So the FBI decided they'd convince him. And they convinced him by playing the tapes of Gotti complaining about Gravano. Gotti said Sammy was greedy, he was ungrateful, and most of the hits that John had ordered were at the request of Sammy Gravano. Gotti alleged that the murders were on Gravano's head, and Gotti also called Sammy a mad dog killer. Sammy the Bull got mad. He turned red. He got angry. He realized that the boss was planning to make him the fall guy. And Sammy knew he couldn't beat this rap. And he knew that at the end of the day, he was safer with the feds. And in November of 1991, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, underboss to John Gotti and the Gambino crime family, turned rat. This trial was going to be different. It was strong, and now the government had an ace in the hole with Sammy. The feds, with a made man as a government witness, had a case that might just stick to the Teflon Don. Sammy became the centerpiece of the trial. At the time, he was the highest-ranking mobster ever to turn state's evidence, the biggest rat in mob history to that date. When the trial began, the judge took no chances. The jury was sequestered and guarded. That was to prevent tampering. The courtroom was packed. Sammy the Bull took the stand, and John Gotti stopped smiling. And Sammy told the story with all the gory details, names, dates, times, places. He implicated more Gambino mobsters than anyone ever had. He identified chains of command, interior workings of the mob, who could authorize what and who could give directives. John Gotti stared that gaze of hate, betrayal, disgust, and his eyes burned with the want of revenge. For 7 weeks, that trial lasted. For 7 weeks, 800 to 1,000 people every day, mostly Gotti supporters, crowded outside that courthouse waiting to see Gotti. And on April 2nd of 1992, after 13 hours of deliberation, the verdict was in. John Gotti, guilty on all charges. A riot broke out in the street. The crowd began to chant, "Free John Gotti." Gotti supporters flipped over cars, smashed windows. They were breaking everything they could find. Police had to disperse the crowd. It's interesting how the only jury that ever convicted mob boss John Gotti was the one that he couldn't get to. And on June 23rd of 1992, Gotti was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and a $250,000 fine. 6 months later, he began his sentence in the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. Most of his time was spent in solitary confinement, being allowed out of his cell for 1 hour a day. No fans, no adulation, no fancy clothes. And in 1998, John Gotti was diagnosed with throat cancer. 4 years later, in 2002, Gotti dies in the hospital infirmary at the age of 61. He was given quite the elaborate funeral with a gold casket, but the other mobsters didn't attend. Gotti's funeral was ignored by all the other crime families. Gotti and his antics had essentially dismantled the modern day crime family. And they still haven't ever recovered to this day. So did I tell you something you knew or didn't know about John Gotti?
A lot I didn't know. A lot I did know. But I will say that, when Sammy the Bull takes the stand, that John Gotti had a sinking feeling deep inside of him when he saw it. And that's why his eyes were focused on Sammy and burning.
Oh,
when he looked at Sammy.
They said that if looks could kill, that Sammy Gravano and all of his great grandchildren would be dead. That's the amount of hatred that came.
Well, I mean, look at the stare.
I mean, if you think the only thing that John Gotti was truly scared of was a rat. That's the only thing that was going to bring him down was a rat.
Say that, and the other thing I was going to say is, as far as him going to prison, the worst punishment for him that he could have possibly ever had was the fact that he was in solitary confinement. He couldn't have anybody he could talk to because he thrived on people. That was his thing. And him being by himself for so long, that drove him probably halfway insane. So,
and he maintained until his death that there was no mob. There was no mob. That it took, $80,000, 7 rats or 18 rats and 7 dead people to finally convict him of something that he was innocent of. He maintained his innocence until the day. Of course, the prison's full of people who didn't do it, right?
Right.
I mean, and it's interesting too, though, that he would still try to deny the existence of the mob when he did everything that he could have to throw them out into the limelight.
I was about to say, I know you're solely responsible for half the damn photos the FBI owns at this point.
Yes, but the thing is he wanted everybody to know there was a mob, except the feds. Yeah, he didn't want them to know there was a mob.
I mean, it was a catch-22. I mean, you can tell everybody the feds are going to know too. And, I guarantee you, and I know probably, I mean, they're probably still in operation, but they're doing it like they should be doing it. And like they have been doing it before. They operate in the shadows. They don't want any attention brought to themselves. They want to do what they want to do. And we don't want to give the feds any reason to come and look at us.
Yeah. Well, John Gotti wanted to leave a legacy, and he basically did. His legacy was he dismantled the mob. That just because everything in that trial basically laid out everything of how everything worked.
Right.
I mean, when there are no more secrets, then it's way easier to get caught. So the entire New York crime syndicate took a huge hit. And you're right. While they have built back, they have never regained the strength or the power that they once had. But that's actually a good thing because, mom and pop shops aren't getting shaken down for 30%. Just say, hey, give me 30%. What you got? Why? For protection. Well, I don't need any protection. I'm going along fine. Okay, here you go. Give me 30% or I burn down your building. You need protection from that? I mean, that does, I'm sure it does happen in some areas, but for the most part, people can open businesses, open shops. They can freely trade in the fish market and they can, trade in the construction industry and stuff like that. And so
as far as we know, though,
as far as we know,
I would say, as far as we know,
sure, there's probably some.
There are probably still some rackets, right? And there probably are some people paying protection still, but it's not to the level it was where everybody had a block, everybody had a section, and everything was divided up. So,
but I do love anything to do with the mob, anything to do with the mafia. So that was good.
So let me give y'all a couple of homework lessons. If you really, really like mobsters, you need to watch the show Fear City. It is a documentary about the RICO cases and about the five individual groups that were assigned to the 5 individual families to take down the mob. There are actual mobsters that work with Gravano and Gotti that are interviewed that are freely talking. You have got FBI agents who were on the case. You have police officers who were on the case. You have low-level mobsters. You have higher-up mobsters, people that are willing to talk, and they are telling you everything. Now, a couple of them will go, you know what? You can ask me any question you want, and I promise you I'll tell the truth, but I can't promise you I'll answer. If I can't talk about it, I'll say I can't talk about it. Usually those are they're asking about murders because there is no statute of limitation on murder. So another really good one to go and look at. Let's see. And I just lost it. It just went out of my head. I'm trying to think of the name of it real quick. Gotti, Father and Son, and I believe that is on.
That's A&E, I think.
That's A&E. Yeah, A&E Crime, and that is a very good one. And that is John Gotti Jr.'s words about what happened to his family. And you know, John Jr. at one point became a little underboss when Gotti was trying to run it from jail, but didn't work.
And Sammy the Bull actually has a YouTube page you can go and look at, and he talks about all kinds of stuff.
Oh my God. That was part of the reason I was up so late last night, because I went down to Sammy the Bull Gravano, and Sammy the Bull is fascinating. He's fascinating. I think he also does his own little podcast too, along with Tommy. What's Tommy? Say it right for me, Ryan. Tommy.
Michael Lucchese or Tommy?
Michael Francis.
Yes, not Lucchese. Yeah, Michael Francis. Sorry.
Yeah, Michael Francis. Yeah. Also, mobster has his own podcast. You guys, you can actually hear the stories from Sammy the Bull, and you can actually hear the stories from Michael Francis. Say his name for me.
Michael Francis.
Yes. I listened to Sammy the Bull. Yes. And all I kept thinking of was, you dirty rat. You dirty rat. Because again, I had a little crush on Gotti. I had a big crush on Gotti. I have that Gotti Time magazine. I have that Gotti People magazine. I have them. I at one point had them framed and they were over my bed because I was so in love with John Gotti. Again, I learned a lot about my own psychological self here, about, you know, what my thing is for older men with, you know, a little bit pudgy.
Like God help him if they have an Australian accent.
And if he would have had any accent works. I'm just especially fond of the Australian. I got to tell you, I really like that New York accent too. Come here, sugar. I'll be your little Gumar. I don't care. So, any other questions, gentlemen? Anything else that we?
No, I thought that does it.
I thought it was bad. Look, from somebody on the other side of the spectrum, we know that you two have a lot more knowledge.
We're mob nerds.
Mob and everything area. I actually found it fascinating. I enjoyed the story. That's probably why I didn't speak of as much as I wanted to tonight, but I was more fascinated with the story and just enthralled with hearing it.
And child, I told you I cut a lot out. I didn't tell you everything I wanted to tell you. So I'm like, this podcast will be 11 hours long if I do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have to edit where we can.
We do.
So, well, anything else on that?
After you.
Nope? All right. Well, we want to thank y'all for joining us for another episode of Everything Vaguely Paranormal this week. Remember, whatever social media channel you are watching us from, that is not the only social media channel we are on. We are across the board, and we don't utilize every page for everything, so you might be missing out on a couple of things. So make sure you go and follow us across the board and stay up to date on locations where we'll be investigating and selling public tickets and all that.
Special events we're going to be attending.
Special events. Go watch the previous announcement we made earlier at 7:00 tonight that has 4 announcements that we dropped. And also on top of that, we'll go ahead and tell you all as well, since we announced it earlier, Longview is being rebooked for August the 6th. So we will be selling tickets for that again. Be on the lookout for those. And we also have our Old Park tickets on sale right now for October the 8th, Saturday, October the 8th only. Announcement at 7 p.m. Go watch that as to why.
Go watch that.
And, and I'll let Shelly take it away.
So if you want to know what we really talk about, not just while we're on the screen, but whenever we're off the screen, go and become a Patreon member. It's $5 a month, and you get all the pre-broadcasts. You get Spirits with Shelly, Bedtime with Blake, and Ryan's reviews. And again, if you want to hear about we tell you a little early about what actually happened at Longview. So if you're a Patreon member on tonight's pre-broadcast, we actually tell you some of that investigation, and we tell you and show you some of the evidence we got exclusive to Patreon members. So go sign up, $5 a month. What else, Ryan?
So if you would go to Apple Music, or you would go to Spotify, or anywhere where you get your podcast, please rate and review us. It boosts our signal so more people see us. Also, tell 2 friends about us and have them tell 2 friends. On top of that, if you have any questions or you have any thing you want to ask us, please email us. And Blake, what is that email?
That is the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
That's right. Yeah. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us to talk about John Gotti. And thank you for watching Everything Vaguely Paranormal. We greatly appreciate your support and you tuning in. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and for my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts, as always, look out for rats, and we will see you next Tuesday.